That night was like a nightmare that refused to end. Rua was lying on the hard, cold floor. Her face was swollen, and blood was coming from her lip. Her whole body was shaking, not just from pain, but from the fear and shame that filled the small room. Her children, little Sifa and his sister Luma, stood there crying helplessly. They were too small, too weak to stop their father, Bako, who had once again used his fists to show his power. But in that dark and painful moment, something powerful happened. Sifa, with tears running down his cheeks, bent close to his mother and whispered softly, "Mama, when I grow up, I will make him pay." His small voice was full of pain, but inside, a fire had started to burn. The neighbors heard the noise that night, but they closed their doors. They thought Sifa's words were just the empty promise of a child who couldn't do anything. Even Rua herself, broken and tired, could not imagine that her son's words would one day change everything. No one believed the small boy. They thought he would grow up and forget, just like many children do. But Sifa was not like other children. That night, as he watched his mother bleeding and crying, something inside him made a decision. A promise was written deep in his heart. People had no idea that this little boy, standing in the shadows with clenched fists and wet eyes, would grow up with a plan that would shake their world. They couldn't see it yet, but the story was only beginning. Rua was once a woman who believed in love. She dreamed of a happy home, with laughter, peace, and children growing up in joy. When she met Bako, she thought he was the man who would give her that life. He was sweet in the beginning, always smiling and saying nice things. He promised her the world, and Rua, with her soft heart, believed him. She left her family and friends behind to build a life with him, thinking she had found her forever happiness. But after marriage, Bako changed like day turns to night. His smiles turned to shouts, his sweet words turned to harsh insults, and soon his hands that once held her gently became fists that struck her face. At first, Rua thought it was her fault. She told herself maybe if she cooked better, or stayed quieter, or tried harder, Bako would go back to the man she fell in love with. But no matter what she did, the beatings continued. And what made it worse, what broke her heart more than the pain, was that Bako didn't even try to hide his violence. He would hit her while the children stood there watching, too small to understand why their mother was being hurt, too small to stop it. Sifa and Luma, their innocent eyes full of fear, saw everything. They saw their father become a monster, and their mother turn from a happy woman into someone who flinched at every sound. The neighbors knew, the relatives heard, but no one helped. Rua was trapped like a bird in a cage with no door. She couldn't run away. Where would she go with two little children? She had no money, no one to turn to. Every day was the same. Wake up, try to survive, and pray Bako's anger wouldn't explode. But with each slap, with each cruel word, something strange started to grow inside her children. They were young, but they were watching closely. Every time their mother cried, every time Bako raised his hand, Sifa and Luma felt pain too, but also anger. A quiet anger that started small, like a seed buried deep in their hearts. Bako thought he was breaking his family, making them weak and helpless. But what he didn't know was that every beating was actually making his children stronger. He was teaching them, without knowing, to hate injustice. He was giving them the reason to fight back one day. So while Rua felt like she was stuck in a nightmare with no end, deep inside her home, her children were changing. They were turning their pain into power, and their fear into a plan. No one could see it yet, not Bako, not even Rua herself, but the seeds of resistance had been planted. And one day, those seeds would grow into something that Bako could never control. As the years passed, Sifa and Luma grew older, but they never forgot those painful nights. The images of their mother crying, lying on the floor, and their father shouting and beating her stayed fresh in their minds. Some people thought they would grow up weak, scared and broken, but Sifa and Luma were different. Deep inside, they carried a secret fire, a promise they made to each other when they were still very young. They looked at each other one night, after another terrible beating, and without speaking too many words, they both knew they had to save their mother. They had to end this pain, no matter how long it took. At school, they acted like normal kids. They smiled, played, and did their lessons. But inside, their hearts were hardening. getting ready for the battle ahead. Every time Bako raised his hand at their mother, they felt their anger grow. Every time their neighbors gossiped but did nothing, their resolve became stronger. Sifa would sometimes sit in silence, staring at nothing, but in his mind, he was making plans. Luma, though younger, followed her brother's lead. She started listening carefully, watching adults, learning things that would help them later. They couldn't fight back yet. They were still children, but they were patient. They waited and prepared in silence, like seeds growing under the ground, hidden from the world. People around them saw two small, helpless kids living in a broken home. They pitied them. Some even laughed at them, saying they would amount to nothing. But those people had no idea. Sifa and Luma had made a silent pact, a powerful promise that one day they would free their mother from this nightmare. They would not run away and leave her behind. No, they would stay, get stronger, and then strike when the time was right. They trained their minds, saved their strength, and most importantly, they never let go of their mission. In the dark corners of their little room, they whispered dreams of a better life. They imagined a day when their mother would smile again, free from pain. They shared secret plans, ideas that grew bigger as they grew older. They learned skills, watched people, and slowly built small connections with kind-hearted people who hated what Bako was doing. All this time, Bako never noticed. He thought his children were scared of him, just like their mother. But he was blind to the storm he was creating in their hearts. Their silent pact was unbreakable. It gave them hope on the hardest days and courage when things seemed impossible. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to wait, to fight, and to win. And the world, which saw them as powerless kids, was about to learn just how wrong they were. Because Sifa and Luma were not just children anymore. They were warriors in the making, quietly preparing for the day they would change their fate forever. That day was darker than all the others. Bako came home, angry and drunk, shouting at everyone. Rua tried to keep quiet, tried to calm him, but Bako was like a storm that no one could stop. This time, he didn't just slap her or push her. He beat her so badly that she couldn't even stand up. Blood was everywhere, and Rua's eyes closed as she fell to the floor. Sifa and Luma screamed and cried, begging their father to stop, but Bako didn't care. He left their mother lying there, broken and bleeding. When the neighbors finally heard the noise and came in, they rushed Rua to the hospital. The doctors said if they had come even a little later, she might have died. As Sifa sat in that cold hospital corridor, watching the nurses fight to save his mother, something deep inside him snapped. His heart, already hardened by years of pain, turned to stone. The tears in his eyes dried up. He looked at Luma, and without saying a word, they both knew this was it. This was the last time their mother would suffer. This was the day their plan would no longer stay hidden. It was time to act. Sifa clenched his fists. He was no longer that small boy who cried quietly while his father hit his mother. He was now a young man ready to fight back, ready to protect the woman who gave him life. Luma, with her sharp mind and brave heart, stood beside him. Together, they made a decision. They would bring down Bako, no matter what it took. They would not wait any longer. The years of secret planning, saving and building strength were over. Now was the time to strike. Nothing could stop them now. Not fear, not threats, not even the danger that stood ahead. They had seen their mother almost die in front of them. That pain burned so deeply that it turned into pure fire inside them. The siblings knew that if they didn't act now, Bako would kill their mother one day, and they refused to let that happen. As Rua lay in the hospital bed, fighting for her life, Sifa and Luma left that hospital with one mission in their hearts: to make sure their mother never had to face Bako again. They didn't care about what people would say. They didn't care about the risks. Their plan was no longer just a dream. It had become their only choice. Their hearts beat with one voice. It's time. Time to end the nightmare. Time to set their mother free. And this time, they would not fail. Sifa was only 14, but his mind was older than his years. He knew that waiting and hoping would not save his mother. So, while other boys his age played and laughed, Sifa went out to work. He cleaned shops, carried heavy loads in the market, and ran errands from morning till night. Every coin he earned he didn't spend on sweets or toys. He saved it all. Even when he was tired and his feet hurt, he kept going, because he had one dream in his heart: to make his mother free one day. At the same time, Luma, his younger sister, was also growing stronger in her own way. She watched how people in their town whispered about the abuse but did nothing. So, quietly, she started talking to women who had faced the same pain. She listened to their stories, and slowly, she built a circle of people who were tired of staying silent. Luma learned skills from them, how to sew, how to speak boldly, and even how to connect with people who could help. She became a light in the dark, but she hid her strength until the right time. The two siblings didn't dream about revenge. No, they wanted something bigger. They wanted to transform their mother's life completely. They didn't just want Bako to stop hitting Ruwa. They wanted her to live in a home where love, peace, and respect ruled. Sifa dreamed of buying land and building a small house where no fist would ever fall again. Luma dreamed of creating a safe place not only for their mother, but for other women too. Their pain had burned in their hearts for years, but now they turned that pain into power. Sifa grew muscles from carrying heavy loads, but he also grew wisdom. He learned how to deal with people, how to save money, and how to stay focused even when life was hard. Luma sharpened her voice and her mind, becoming a leader quietly. She made friends with teachers, market women, and even local leaders who hated men like Bako. Together, the siblings became a force that no one could see coming. Everyone still saw them as poor, broken children, but behind the scenes, they were building their future, brick by brick. Every coin Sifa saved, every skill Luma learned, brought them one step closer to their goal. They refused to let their mother's tears be wasted. They turned those tears into the fuel that kept them going. And even though the road was hard, they never looked back. Their plan was not just about escaping, it was about changing everything forever. And deep inside, they both knew their time was coming. It was Bako's birthday, and as always, he threw a big party for himself. He sat in the center, laughing loudly, surrounded by his friends who only came for the free food and drinks. He drank glass after glass, boasting about how strong and powerful he was. No one dared to challenge him. But that night was different. That night, Sifa and Luma, now older and stronger, stood quietly in the shadows, waiting for their moment. When the music was loud and Bako was deep in his drunken pride, Sifa stepped forward. Luma stood right beside him, her eyes burning with the pain and courage built over the years. The room fell silent as people noticed the two children standing tall, no longer looking like the scared little kids they once were. Bako frowned, confused by their sudden boldness. "What are you two doing here?" "Go away," he barked. But Sifa didn't flinch. Luma didn't move. Sifa's voice was steady, but powerful as he spoke. He began to tell everyone the truth. He spoke of the beatings, the nights their mother bled on the cold floor, the times they hid in corners, shaking in fear. Luma added every painful detail, her voice clear and strong, making sure every guest heard the horror they lived through. They didn't just accuse, they showed proof, pictures of bruises, hospital reports, even testimonies from neighbors who had heard the screams but stayed silent. The room, once full of laughter, turned cold and quiet. Bako's face turned pale as the truth hit him like a slap. His friends looked away, ashamed and shocked. Some even stood up and left, unable to face what they had just heard. The man who had ruled with fear was now exposed in front of everyone. Sifa and Luma didn't stop there. They announced that their mother, Ruwa, was no longer under his control. They had saved enough money, built connections, and prepared everything for her to leave and never return. They declared that Bako's time of terror was over, not just in their home, but in the entire community. People began whispering, some even shouting angrily at Bako. The same people who once feared him now saw him for the monster he truly was. Bako, once the loudest voice in the room, stood speechless. He looked at his children, no longer weak, no longer afraid, and for the first time, he felt powerless. The script had flipped. The victims had become the warriors, and the abuser was now the one shaking. Sifa and Luma had waited for this night their whole lives, and when their moment came, they took it fully, without mercy, making sure their mother's pain was finally heard, and justice began right there in front of everyone. By the next morning, the whole town was buzzing with whispers. People who had been at the party couldn't keep quiet. They told their neighbors, who told their friends, and soon everyone knew what had happened. The story spread like wildfire. Bako, the man everyone once feared, had been exposed by his own children. His dark secrets were now out in the open, and no one could pretend not to know anymore. Women in the community, who had once stayed silent out of fear, suddenly found their voices. One by one, they started sharing their own painful stories about Bako. Some said he had threatened them in the past. Some said he had cheated them, and others even admitted they had heard Ruwa's cries for years, but were too afraid to help. Now, with Sifa and Luma standing brave, these women felt strong enough to speak. It was like a dam had broken, and all the hidden pain came pouring out. Men in the town, who used to respect Bako or drink with him, now looked at him with disgust. Shopkeepers refused to sell him things. People crossed the street just to avoid him. Even his so-called friends from the party stopped answering his calls. No one wanted to be seen with him anymore. The same community that once cheered for him now turned their backs. Everywhere Bako went, he felt the weight of shame. Walls that once echoed his loud laughter now whispered his disgrace. Children pointed at him. Women spat on the ground when he passed, and men muttered under their breath. He could no longer walk tall. He kept his head down, hiding his face, because the whole world seemed to be against him now. And it wasn't the police who chased him. It was society itself. People made it clear that he was no longer welcome. His power was gone. His fear had no hold over anyone anymore. The man who once hunted his family with violence was now the one being hunted by the angry eyes and voices of his community. Bako's downfall was swift and total. He wasn't just shamed, he was completely rejected. He could feel it in every step, every stare, every cold shoulder. The mighty hunter had truly become the hunted, and there was no place left for him to hide. The sun was rising when Ruwa stood at the gate of a small but beautiful new house. Her hands trembled as Sifa placed the keys in her palm. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat was tight with emotion. After all the years of crying in silence, hiding her bruises and feeling trapped, this day felt like a dream, but it was real. Her children made it real. Sifa smiled at her, his eyes shining with tears too. Mama, no more pain. This is your home now, safe. Free. Luma hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're free now, Mama. No one will ever hurt you again." Ruwa looked at their faces, faces that had once been full of fear, now glowing with pride and strength. And that's when the tears came. But these tears were different. They were not from sadness or pain. They were tears of victory, tears of pride. She stepped inside the house, her feet feeling light, as if the heavy chains that had weighed her down for so many years had finally fallen off. The rooms were simple but bright. Every corner whispered peace. No shouting, no slaps, just silence, the sweet silence of freedom. As she walked through her new home, memories flashed in her mind. The nights she had slept on the cold floor, the times she had shielded her children from blows, the promises she had whispered to them in the dark. And now, here they were, standing tall beside her, fulfilling those promises. They had not broken, they had risen. Neighbors who once turned away from her pain now came to congratulate her. Some brought small gifts, others just hugs. They called her strong, brave, a survivor. For the first time, Ruwa felt seen, not as a victim, but as a woman who had conquered her nightmare. She stepped outside, took a deep breath, and looked at the sky. The sun felt warm on her face. She smiled through her tears, knowing that this was the beginning of a new life, a life where she would laugh without fear, sleep without nightmares, and live without looking over her shoulder. Sifa and Luma stood on either side of her, holding her hands. Together, they had turned pain into power, fear into freedom. And as they stood there, Ruwa knew deep in her heart, they were no longer the broken family Bako had tried to destroy. They were whole, they were strong, and they were free. She wiped her tears, lifted her head high, and whispered, "I will never look back." And with that, Ruwa walked forward into her new life, leaving the darkness behind forever. Bako, the man who once walked around with his chest high, thinking no one could touch him, now found himself alone and unwanted. The same people who used to fear him now crossed the street to avoid even looking at him. His loud voice, which once made people tremble, had turned weak and useless. His power was gone, just like dust blown away by the wind. Everywhere he went, people whispered. Mothers held their children closer, and men shook their heads in disgust. Bako had become a shame to the whole town. He tried to act tough at first, pretending nothing had changed. But deep inside, he knew he had lost everything. His own family, his respect, his pride. No one wanted to hire him. No one wanted to sit with him. Even his so-called friends disappeared, afraid that being near him would stain their names too. Day by day, Bako's world grew smaller. His once big house felt empty. His money dried up, and hunger became his daily visitor. But here's the part that shocked everyone. Sifa and Luma didn't lift a finger to hurt him. They didn't need fists or revenge. They used their unity, their love for their mother, and their smart plans to win. They showed the whole town that true power doesn't come from beating people down. It comes from lifting each other up and standing together. That's what crushed Bako more than anything else. He saw his children rise while he fell deeper into the pit he had dug with his own hands. People in the town started telling their children the story of Bako's fall. It became a lesson passed from mouth to mouth that no abuser, no matter how strong, can stand against truth and unity. Even the elders said they had never seen such justice, where no blood was shed, but the guilty paid with shame and loneliness. It was justice that didn't just punish Bako, it healed the wounds he had caused. Bako's name, which once made people fear, now made them spit in disgust. He ended up begging for food, sitting in the market corner where children pointed and whispered, "That's the man who lost everything." His downfall was public, and everyone watched as the man who thought he was untouchable became nothing. And Sifa and Luma, they continued building their new life with their mother, stronger and more respected than ever. They didn't waste time looking back at Bako's misery. Their victory wasn't in his pain, it was in their freedom, their peace, and the new future they created. And that, the people said, was the sweetest and most powerful justice of all, a lesson that echoed through the town, reminding everyone that no evil lasts forever and no pain goes unanswered. With the pain behind them, Sifa and Luma knew they had a bigger mission. They remembered every tear their mother cried, every bruise she hid, and every night they all went to sleep in fear. They didn't want any other woman or child to go through the same nightmare. So, with the little success they had built, they started something powerful. Safe places where women like their mother could run to and find peace. These shelters became more than just buildings. They became homes filled with love, support, and hope. Women who once felt trapped found freedom in those shelters. They came broken, but they left standing tall, just like Rua. Sifa and Luma made sure these women had food, a safe bed, and people who listened without judgment. They even brought in teachers to help them learn skills, so they could stand on their own feet. Slowly, word spread across towns and villages. Women whispered about these safe havens, and more found the courage to leave their abusers behind. Rua, now free from her painful past, would sit in the front of these shelters sometimes, watching as women arrived with fear in their eyes and left with smiles. Her heart swelled with pride every time she saw her children working, speaking at events, and holding the hands of women who reminded her of her old self. She often remembered that cold night long ago, when little Sifa, with tears in his eyes, promised her he would end her pain. And now, as she watched him and Luma changing lives, she knew that promise wasn't just kept, it was multiplied. Sifa and Luma became heroes, not just in their town, but everywhere. Their stories spread far and wide, inspiring others to stand up against abuse. People started calling their shelters houses of new beginnings, because that's what they gave to every woman who walked through their doors. And Rua, once a victim, now smiled every day, knowing her children turned their darkest pain into light for so many. And every time she looked at them, she whispered in her heart, "My children kept their promise."